and welcome back to Bookish Theories. In today's video, we'd like to talk about 7Fates CHAKHO with BTS, focusing on a little breakdown and analysis of the film, the prologue and episode 1 to see what they can tell us about this unfolding storyline. I'm so excited! Did you love it? I loved it. Let's talk about it. But first, a couple of announcements, the first of which is more of an advice, to be honest. If you want to get the full CHAKHO experience, I highly recommend you guys read both the webtoon and the Wattpad because the two versions are actually a little bit different. The webtoon obviously relies on visuals, whereas the Wattpad has the web novel in it, so it's a little bit more introspective, and we can say that one kind of completes the other. Second of all, this video will obviously contain spoilers for the prologue and episode 1, so in case you don't want any surprises, this is your cue to leave and come back once you're done reading it. And last but not least, speaking of reading, I also decided that I'm going to post videos according to the free releases. I know that I can access next week's episode with the coins, however, like in these videos I'm going to talk about just the free content that everybody can access. So everybody's on the same page and everybody can enjoy it together. Okay, now that we got this out of the way, let's jump right in and see what's going on. We have a lot to unpack, a lot of clues to uncover, and a lot of Korean mythology that is already being referenced. So without further ado, let's go and let's get it. Now, much like anticipated in some of my past videos, this story begins in the city of Shinshi, which is a city that comes straight out of Korean mythology and that, as we'll see in a second, is actually more important than what it seems. The inciting incident of our story actually takes place on January 16th, which, according to the lunar calendar, actually marks the day of the visitor. This day of the visitor, however, soon becomes a massacre in disguise because each year on this day, some creatures that should not belong in this world come through into the city in order to bring chaos, and these creatures are none other than the bomb. Now in the webtoon, these entities are shown as humanoid creatures with the features of a tiger, but according to the narration, we discover that these entities not only have special powers, but can also disguise themselves as a human. Think of them as a tiger version of a werewolf, if you will. A were-tiger, maybe? Something like that. Now, even if in chapter 1 the bomb are just starting to come through, in the prologue it's anticipated that this danger will become more prominent as time goes by, to the point that the people of Shinshi will start hunting them down. After all, these creatures are very violent and bloody. They are very strong, they kill humans, they kidnap them, and even feast on them, to the point that after a while the people of Shinshi will start to come through and bomb hunters will start to appear. Among these people, this is where our CHAKHO come into play, which are none other than the protagonist of our story. These are 7 tiger hunters that come together in order to defeat the bomb, and as we'll see in a second, each of them has their own reason in order to join. In the prologue, for instance, the characters are introduced in a hunting scene that takes place right in the middle of Shinshi. A boy is being hunted down by an ambush of tigers when all of a sudden the CHAKHO appear in order to save the day. So let's take a look at each of them to see what we know up until now. Now, the first character that goes for the attack is actually Hosu, which is none other than Osok's character. He's the one using the red chain with the blade of a scythe, and according to what he told us in the interview, his character will actually be kidnapped by a bomb. In order to survive the den of the tiger, Hosu will have to do something terrible, and even if we still don't know what that is, his poster tells us that he'll become a monster. This might imply that in order to survive in the den of the bomb, he will have to become a bomb himself, and this would also explain why in the story he has golden eyes. Next up we have Juan, which is Taeyoung's character and the one fighting with the green spear. Now, even if up until now he has no speaking lines, his character is described as very compassionate and kind, and his story will actually revolve around him falling in love with a bomb. Next up we have Zayn, which is Yoongi's character, as well as the one with the green hair. Now in the prologue, he's the one fighting with blades, and his backstory actually revolves around him almost being eaten alive by a bomb. In the poster, however, we also discovered that Zayn might also have some psychic abilities because he also has visions of somebody's past life. Now, since this is a story set in the future, the past life that they are referring to here might actually be set in our present, and this is actually an idea that is worth keeping in mind. You see, if you think about it, the past life that they are talking about might actually be BTS themselves, or even the characters that we left in the Bangtan universe. Now, full disclosure, this is just speculation on my part. I have no proof whatsoever that something like this can actually take place. However, if you think about it, it would be a very nice way to tie in together two storylines that basically have nothing to do with each other. Up until now, we'll have to wait and see about this, but it's just something to keep in mind, I guess. Now, next up we meet Juan, who is Jin's character, as well as the archer of the group. In the story, he decides to join the team because a bomb killed all of his family, so him being the only one left, he wants to avenge his loved ones and bring the bomb to justice. The next character that we meet instead is actually Dogen, who is Namjoon's alter ego, as well as the one fighting with firearms and explosives. In the interview, this character was described as a crime expert who has had a hard life and has survived in the back alleys of the city of Shinshi. He seems to be a very independent character that initially refuses to join the CHAKHO but is eventually convinced by fate, so even if he's a team player, he can definitely fight on his own as well. Last but not least, however, we have Zia and Haru, who are respectively Jungkook and Jimin's characters who fight with a sword and a binding rope. Now, if you read the webtoon, then you know that up until now the action seems to focus on these two characters in particular. On one hand, we have Haru, a mountain deity that started off as a rock but took human form in order to fight against the bomb. His role in the grand scheme of things is to guard the seal that separates our world from the world of shadows where the bomb actually comes from. His job, however, was made very difficult by Zia, who inadvertently broke the seal and allowed the bomb to gain full access to our world. Now, according to Jungkook's interview, Zia is a character that is half a human, half a bomb, but at the beginning we get the sense that Zia himself seems unaware of this information. In episode 1, for instance, we learned that Zia was an orphan that grew up in an orphanage without knowing much about his parents. Even if as a child he always wanted to know about his parents' death, growing up life took over and he became more worried about getting by rather than to learn about his past. This, however, changes on the night of January 16th, which, as I mentioned before, is the day of the visitor, but also the anniversary of his parents' death. Suspicious. Let's take a look. On this night, the story begins with Zia walking down the street, when all of a sudden he is approached by a very strange man. Now, if we take a look at the Wattpad version, Zia also tells us that he has a distinct feeling that this person is not human, but at the time he doesn't know what that is. Now, if we look at the webtoon, we know that this person is probably a bomb in disguise, but in the story Zia doesn't know it yet, meaning that at this point the characters are still pretty much unaware of what is about to take place. You see, up until now, the bomb are either in hiding or still in the world of shadows. They haven't invaded Shinshi just yet, and life is still pretty much normal. This, however, changes soon enough, because when the man approaches Zia, he tells him that in order to know the truth about his parents, he has to go to Ingwan Mountain. Now, at the beginning, Zia doesn't really pay much attention to this man because he thinks that he is a creep and that's about it, but this changes when this man actually proves that he knows more things than he should. You see, this man knows his name, he knows that his mother was a shaman and that they used to live near the bomb rock, and at that point Zia starts to listen because he basically unlocked a memory from the past. When he was a child, Zia used to sing a song next to the bomb rock with his father. This is a very happy memory, but this happy memory soon becomes a very sad one because he hears his mother screaming, and we get the sense that this moment has something to do with the death of his parents. In order to find some answers, Zia eventually decides to listen to the stranger and go back to the bomb rock located in Ingwan Mountain, but when he does, he ends up in the hospital without any memory of what took place. Now, in the Wattpad, the chapter 1 actually begins from here, and as it turns out, it begins with a nightmare. At this point, Zia dreams of a thumping sound that feels like a gigantic heart pulsating in the abyss of darkness, and this abyss is described as an ominous presence that catches up to him, squeezing his chest like a python does to its prey. That's intense. So when Zia eventually wakes up, he receives a visit from a detective, and this visit actually shocks him to the core. You see, as it turns out, Zia is the only survivor of a massacre. In the place where they found him, they also found other 24 bodies that were mutilated and fed on, so the only person that knows the truth is actually Zia himself. The problem is that he doesn't remember anything, and his evasive nature actually makes the detective extremely suspicious. Little did they know, however, that this would just be the beginning, because in the span of a few days, this type of occurrences would become more and more frequent in the city as a whole. You see, in the span of a month, Shinshi is essentially overrun by the bomb. These are creatures that are between man and animal. They are ferocious, unpredictable, voracious, and many people start falling victims of their violence. When Zia recovers, he decides to go back to the rock in order to find some answers, and this is the moment where we finally meet Haru, which is Jimin's character, as well as the human embodiment of the bomb rock itself. Now, since Jimin's character is, a rock, he knows things that other people don't know because he's been there for quite a long time, and on top of that he also has powers that normal people don't have. Haru essentially explains that he is a guardian of a seal that divides one world from another. Every year on January 16th, this door between worlds opens and the bomb visitors come in order to blend with the humans and feast on them. This year, however, is different because this year Zia broke the seal, thus allowing the bomb to roam free across the city. In order to unlock his memory, story, Haru touches his forehead and Zia remembers an encounter with a bomb that tries to kill him, and even if up until now we don't know who that person is, we can assume that it's because of him that the seal has been broken. Now before I end this video, I would like to take a look at the way Korean mythology was actually included in episode 1, because even if this is just the beginning of the tale, there are already many references to keep in mind. If we take a look at the story film, for instance, we get the sense that in the future, the CHAKHO will actually be accused of being bombs pretending to be humans. Now this is a type of accusation that could be fitting for characters like Zia or Haru, for instance, but for the others not so much, so this makes me think that in the future there might be a conspiracy taking place against them. You see, even if up until now the story is presenting the bomb as the main antagonist, so far the story also introduced another entity that has stayed in the background since the very beginning. This entity is none other than Isal, which is none other than a corporation that seems to own half of Shinshi. So far we can see that it controls phones, media, food, hotels, and in the film we discover that it somehow also controls the law because its logo is present in the wanted sign as well. Now the idea that this corporation will be very important in the future is also foreshadowed in the webtoon, because in one frame we see that the CEO of this company is the one reassuring the population and the one declaring the state of emergency after the attack of the bomb. But why exactly? Like, think about it, for real. Like, why would a CEO have the power and agency to declare the state of emergency on a city? Well, this time the answer might actually be hiding in the name of the CEO himself, because his name is actually Hwanung, and as it turns out, in Korean mythology, Hwanung was a very important character. You see, as I mentioned earlier, this story is set in Shinshi, and in Korean mythology, this is a semi-legendary city that refers to the creation of the first Korean nation. In the original legend, Shinshi is the city of the gods. It's like a protected area where people could come together and exchange goods in the markets of the gods or of the spirits, and in the original story, this place was founded by none other than Hwanung. You see, in the original story, Hwanung was the son of the god of the sky, and all he wanted was to descend on earth in order to live here. When he was granted permission, he descended with 3,000 of his followers, and with the help of the clouds, the rain and the wind, he created laws, morality, and he was able to teach the humans about medicine, agriculture, and the arts. In the story, the location where he first descended is actually marked by a sacred tree called Shindansu, and this tree is also referenced in the film as well as in the webtoon itself. Now, in Korean mythology, this tree is essentially considered the center of the universe, so by default it's also the center of the city of Shinshi, which was essentially created around it. What's interesting about this is that to an extent, the Hwanung and the tree might also have something to do with Jimin's character, because in the story he also interacts with a bear and a tiger. You see, in the story, while he's building Shinshi, a tiger and a bear approach him and actually ask to be transformed into humans, which incidentally is a concept that in the future might even be used to justify the way the bomb actually looked like in the story. In the original story, however, Hwanung challenges them to stay 100 days in a cave only eating garlic and mugworts, and at the end the tiger fails and escapes the cave, while the bear succeeds and is eventually transformed into a beautiful woman. Now, after praying to the tree, Hwanung also gives her a son called Dogen, and this son is the one that will essentially found the first kingdom of Korea. He is called the son of the bear, the grandson of the sky, and the reason why I'm telling you this is because at the end he becomes a mountain deity that also has a shrine on the very same mountain that is mentioned in CHAKHO. If in Korean mythology Dogen is a guardian god in Ingwan mountain, in CHAKHO Haru is a guardian god on the very same peak. You see, even if the story is technically set in Shinshi, Ingwan Mountain is a real-life mountain that is located in Seoul, and the bomb rock that Jimin plays in the story is a real-life rock that you can actually visit. If you go to Korea now, you can finally have a picture with Jimin. He's always there, he's not going anywhere. Jokes aside though, the fact that this mountain actually exists is actually very important, because this means that Shinshi in the story is none other than the future of Seoul. This might also mean that Hwanung, the CEO, might not only have something to do with Haru, but also be the main reason why the bomb are not exactly tigers to begin with. But you know what? This is just a theory for now. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. In the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please think about liking and subscribing. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!